Good afternoon, everyone. I'm just going to leave it a couple more seconds before we start today's session, just while people are joining in. Okay, well, let's get kicked off. So, thank you all for joining today's webinar. We're going to be focusing on the 13th Directive today and how you can kind of utilize the 13th Directive to kind of fuel market expansions into new areas that you may not have thought of previously. Just for anyone who hasn't seen our webinars recently, my name is Liam. I am the Partnerships and Senior Business Development Manager here at Simply VAT. And I am also joined today by my colleague Teb, who's going to be talking us through the 13th Directive slides. Before I hand over to Teb, we're going to just go through a few brief kind of house rules. So one today is going to be quite a informative session, I would say. So please do feel free to ask any questions at all in the comment section. We will be kind of looking at those, and there will be a Q&A session towards the end of today's kind of discussion. We will also be sharing this as a watch on demand following the end of today's session. So if there is anything you're unsure of, please do feel free to look out for that email and watch it there as well. And also, we are going to be running a webinar every single month this year. So stay connected and make sure you sign up to our newsletter to see what we're going to be talking about next month. Just a brief overview before we kind of look at everything today. So basically on today's session, we are going to be, as mentioned before, understanding the 13th directive, kind of, what is it, what's it good for, and how can you utilize that, maximizing your refund value and reinvesting refunds for strategic growth, as well as looking at real world success stories. And with that being said, I will hand over to Taib, who's going to be running us through the kind of next slides.
Thanks, Liam. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Taib. I'm the Principal VAT Consultant at Simply VAT. I have over 15 years, 20 years of VAT experience. I've been in the VAT business for that long. My first role when I started the VAT role was actually to do with 13th Directive. I was running thousands of claims, which with over millions in values. And then from there, of course, I moved on to become a VAT consultant. So now, today we're going to talk about a 13th Directive. What is actually a 13th Directive? The 13th Directive, well, it's a directive which was introduced in November, 17th of November, 86. That allows business established outside the EU to claim VAT refund on qualifying business expenditure in the EU. Of course, the conditions for that is you are not registered or required to register for VAT there. Because if you are registered or required to register for VAT, the way to get the refund is not the 13th Directive, but actually via the local VAT return. Next slide, please, Liam. Yeah, the items that we should consider for the 13th Directive. The first one is taxable persons established outside the community can reclaim input VAT paid on suppliers of goods or services within the community. Basically, if you don't provide any taxable supplies, you are not required to register, or you are not registered, and then you go to a EU country, you incur VAT there, then you are eligible. It is your right. You can apply for the VAT refund. Secondly, member states might limit the refund to states with a reciprocal agreement and may require fiscal representation on the part of the applicant. Basically, some member states they have applied this reciprocity rule, which by the EU member state says if the claimant country does not refund VAT or tax to companies of my country, then I will not refund you the VAT in the EU country. Very quick example on that. for example, Italy is one of the countries that apply the reciprocity rule. Then they say that if an applicant, their country does not refund VAT to Italian businesses, then Italy will not refund VAT to the applicant. The third one is member states must establish their own process for submitting applications, the time limit, the period covered, the authorities to which the application are submitted, and also the minimum amount eligible for the refund. The directive actually has left it to the EU country to set reasonable processes and time limit for submitting the refund claims, including the minimum amount. The minimum amount, you need to know that to submit a VAT claim, a VAT reclaim, there is a minimum amount. Below that amount, the claim will be not processed. So we will talk about this later on in the next slides. Then there are some restrictions on what can be refunded. There are exclusions, of course. Some items, expenditures are refunded, some are not refunded. Again, it's up to the tax authorities really to set their rules on that. And some tax authorities, some countries, they allow refund on all expenditure. Some countries, they limit that to certain expenditures, certain suppliers only, and we will briefly mention that later on as well. Next slide. Yeah, thank you. So what type of situation warrant the 13th directive? We are going to go through a few examples. There are 3 examples we are going to mention later. And just to give you an idea in which situation you can get the refund. So here, for example, the first one is an employee traveling for business in the EU, wanting to reclaim purchase VAT on expenses. Then yes, as long as their company is not making any taxable supply in that country, they don't need to register or are not required to register, then any eligible expenses you incur there's VAT on it, then you can ask for the refund. You can submit VAT refund under the 13th directive. E-commerce businesses, we use here the example of print on demand. It can be others as well, but we use here the example of print on demand suppliers in the EU, and making non-domestic B2C sales and other EU transactions are declared on the OS. So if here, very quickly, if you are not because if you make a local sales to private individual, B2C sales, then usually you are going to be required to register. So 13th directive will not work here. And then if you have EU transactions, B2C, and you also declare them on OS, and because the VAT you collect are declared on OS, so you can still do 13th directive in that country. It's in OS registration, it is not a VAT registration, so you can still go ahead and do the 13th directive reclaim. The last one is actually when you make an import or local purchases in a EU country, and that EU country has the VAT reverse charge on sales by non-resident suppliers, then you can apply for the refund of the VAT charged by local suppliers or import VAT you paid to the local customs. You can request the VAT refund through the 13th directive. Just as a reminder, is what we say when we talk about reverse charge on sales, what actually means. It's basically is where an EU country has implemented the VAT refund, reverse charge. It's usually is, they say it's for if there is a non-resident supplier that supplies goods in that country to a local company established in that country, because you are non-resident, then reverse charge applies. That means that you don't charge VAT, but instead the VAT liability is shifted to the customer. The customer will have to account for that VAT under the reverse charge. So basically, as your sales are under the reverse charge, you don't charge VAT. The VAT is accounted for by the supplier, by the customer, not the supplier. So you are not required to register. Because you are not required to register, if you incur VAT on local purchases or an import, then you are eligible for using the 13th directive to reclaim the import VAT or the local purchase VAT. Now, the key considerations for the 13th directive, of course, there is a specific time frame for reclaim. It's usually it's 6 months or 9 months after the end of the period. It's either the 30th of June or the 30th of September. So, for example, if you have invoices dated 2025, so the time limit to request a refund on those invoices dated 2025 is either 30th of June 2026 or 13th of September 2026. If you miss that deadline, then unfortunately you will not be able to claim it, and it's finished. It is not possible to go beyond that time limit. All tax authorities have a minimum reclaim amount. We are going to cover this quickly later. It's usually if you file an annual return or annual VAT reclaim, it usually is 50 euros. Okay, in most countries, 50 euros. If you do it for shorter period, like a quarter reclaim, then it is 400 euros. So if you make an annual return and you want only to reclaim VAT, it's only like 45 euros or 30 euros, then the claim is going to be rejected. All invoices must be checked and verified for reclaim. So you have to be sure that you keep all documentation. This is very important, actually. Of course, to reclaim the VAT, you need to have the invoices with you. Usually, for 13th directive, the tax authorities require the original invoices. Make sure that you don't put in, like I've seen, like on hotel invoices which says copy folio or copy invoice. All those are not accepted. Or pro forma invoice, all those are not going to be accepted. There is also the other thing is, for example, that make sure that the invoice itself is made out to the company name, not to the employee name. Usually what advise companies is, when they have employees going on business, always remind them, please make sure that you inform the hotel, for example, just to make the invoice to the company name instead of the employee name. The last one here is the fiscal representation. As you are based outside the EU, some tax authorities request that you submit your claim via a local fiscal representative. That fiscal rep is going to be liable for any VAT due, and but some countries, other countries, they don't. For information, for example, in UK, here in UK, there is a process. It is not called 13th directive anymore because of Brexit, but it is called VAT refund for non-resident. Here in UK, for example, a UK HMRC, they don't really require fiscal representation. So any company outside the EU can make the claim directly or via just an agent without having a fiscal rep. So you have to bear in mind that some countries do require this, require a fiscal representative to have it done. So you will need a special documentation with the fiscal rep to be added to the claim. Next slide, please. Yeah. Yeah, we talked earlier about we are going to provide three examples. This is now it's the first one. There is a US company called Soap Products LLC. They send their employees, in this case, they send the chief product officer and the head sales man to an exhibition in Berlin. So this US company will rent a stand at the trade show, an exhibition trade show. They also going to purchase signages for the stand, purchase catering from the show, tickets for the trade show. Of course, they're going to incur some hotel accommodation for the employee, travel expenses, taxis, and restaurants as well. So because you are in Berlin just to attend the trade show, then you're not making any taxable supply that is subject to VAT in that country. For example, you are not selling goods at your stand. You are just there with your stand just to promote your products and advertise your products and your company. Then there is no taxable supply in that country. Then any VAT you incur in that country, of course, subject to restrictions, then here in Germany, virtually in Germany, if everything, all expenses are refundable in Germany. There are some expenses like entertainment expenses, things like that, which are not for business purposes, and then they are not reclaimable. As long as they are for business purposes, then there should not be a problem. So you can recover this. So yeah, the in Germany, you don't require. I don't think you require a fiscal rep, so you can just do the claim yourself, or you can use an agent to do the claim because for there is language barrier. You have to do it in German sometimes, and documents that needs to be maybe sometimes translated as well. So if you would like to use an agent, then you can do that. And of course, as Simply VAT, we do help a lot of our clients with their 13th Directive reclaims. Next slide, thank you. Now the same company, this time it's they do a wholesale of soap products. So they have a distributor in the Netherlands. So they sell those products, soap products, to this distributor. But of course, the distributor is VAT registered in Netherlands and established in Netherlands. But the distributor requires the goods to be received under the DDP, meaning that it's the US company, the supplier, who is going to ship the goods under DDP, being the importer of record, and then deal with all customs clearance and pay import VAT and duty if applicable. So the distributor doesn't want to deal with all that. He just wants to receive the goods in the Netherlands. Now, because Netherlands has a domestic reverse charge, so non-resident is not required to charge VAT when they sell to businesses established and VAT registered in Netherlands. Therefore, that US company is not required to VAT register in the Netherlands, because it would incur import VAT as a result of the DDP import, which the soap company, the soap product, would need to lodge a 13th directive in order to reclaim that import VAT they paid. Of course, for that, you have to make sure that the import documentation, the import clearance, the SAD, shows clearly that you are the importer of record. It shows your name. Usually it is in box 8. It shows the name of the company as an importer of record, and shows clearly the VAT amount, the import VAT amount claimed. So you can use this import declaration, customs declaration, and including in your VAT reclaim, and and then you ask for the refund of that claim in the Netherlands. Next slide, please. Thank you. Now, we talked earlier about the print on demand. This is also applies for the print on demand companies, business. So here again, it's the same company, US company, selling goods to private individuals across the EU via their own web shop. The soap product LCC has registered for Union OS in the Netherlands because they have a stock there, and they make cross-border in the EU intra-community distance sale. So they are registered for VAT because of that. It happens that this company also has a manufacturer in Belgium. That manufacturer ships the goods directly from Belgium, directly by the manufacturer in Belgium, directly to the end consumer in the EU. So as long as the US company does not sell locally in Belgium to private individuals, then the VAT that the manufacturer, Belgian manufacturer, is going to charge can be refunded because you are not required to register for VAT in Belgium. You are not making local sales subject to a local VAT. All your sales you are making are declared on the Union OS. You don't have any local sales in Belgium. Because of that, you don't need to register. So the Belgium supplier manufacturer will have to charge you VAT on that, and that VAT can be refunded under the 13th Directive. Next slide, please. Thank you. Okay, what are the key takeaways here? Of course, you need to expect that it is a detailed process. Reclaim under 13th Directive can be time-consuming and require a lot of documentation. It is time-consuming because you have to input. It's an application. The application can be on paper. Paper can be also online. You will have to input all your details. I mean, the company details, your VAT numbers, and so on. And also, you have to list every single invoice on that claim. So if we're talking about 30, 40, 50, 100 invoices, so it is going to be time consuming. Of course, you need to add also the invoices into the claim, and customs declarations if you have them. If you are doing through an agent, you will need a power of attorney. You will need a VAT certificate, and so on. So it is a detailed process. The rules vary, of course, across the EU. Each member state has its own process, forms, and requirements. As I said, the process can be done online. It can be done on paper. You have to send it in the post to the tax authorities, or you can have it online. So sometimes you need to first have or request login details to go onto their online portal to do that. So it varies from country to country. Of course, the tax authorities aren't eager to refund, so expect strict scrutiny here. Even small errors, every small error or missing details can lead to rejections. As I said before, on invoices, make sure that invoice is properly addressed to the company name, because if it is not addressed to the company name, or even if the address is wrong, the tax authorities have the right to reject that invoice. You have to look to the details and make sure that all invoices and all documents you are putting in the claim are complete and correct. Of course, Some rejections are legitimate. So we are giving an example here. For example, if VAT was incorrectly charged by the supplier, the refund would be rejected. So the right fix for that is to ask the supplier to correct the invoice. It's I can give an example. We talked earlier about the first example when you go to Germany and you rent a stand. Usually, if you rent stand, usually the trade the exhibition host should not charge you VAT on the stand rental, but sometimes they don't know this rule. They do charge VAT. So if you try to reclaim that VAT and you put it in your 13th directive, the tax authorities are going to say, okay, this invoice, VAT on this invoice was incorrectly charged, so I'm not going to refund you. So it is rejected. What you do in that case, you go back to the supplier, you say, actually, you should not have charged me VAT. Can you please credit me the VAT and reissue the invoice without VAT? Next slide, please, Liam.
And it's my time
Your
to
time.
jump in. So thank you so much, Taib. That was really insightful. And yeah, I think if anyone has any questions, please do, as mentioned at the start, just feel free to pop it in the comments and we will just go through those in a very short while. But what we're going to look at now is kind of, if you go through the process of retaining that 13th directive and kind of, getting that refund back, how you can kind of utilize those funds to kind of expand your business into these new areas. For example, if you're kind of sending your employees on business trips to kind of test out a market or anything like that, how you can kind of, utilize that to get into those markets. So we're going to look at expanding into the UK and EU. Firstly, we'll touch base on the UK. I think there's quite a big kind of opportunity here. So there's a few different things as to why you should consider expanding. Firstly, it's a massive and also growing market. So the UK e-commerce is projected to exceed 200 billion by the end of 2026 and is driven by around a 9% average annual growth. It's got a very high digital adoption, so remains about 95% with the internet penetration and strong mobile commerce usage, equating about 58% of transactions. As we all know, it is quite easy to just sit on your phone in the evening and kind of just scroll on, Amazon or any website, just trying to like find anything. Just having a little bit of a doom scroll as we all do. And following on from that, obviously, mobile now represents 70% of that retail traffic, making the UK one of the Europe's highest mobile commerce markets. Also built on deep consumer trust and maturity, so it's one of the most mature digital commerce ecosystems with strong payment security and logistics networks. Very strong demand for seamless, convenient experiences. We all know that we all like to kind of, just have a quick checkout, all that kind of stuff. And it's very AI driven shopping these days, especially on omni-channel delivery and frictionless like checkouts, as I've mentioned. Also very cross-border friendly and internationally competitive. It remains quite highly re- receptive to international retailers. So it's very much supported by that robust infrastructure. It is still one of the main key markets, I would say, that people really do consider when looking to firstly scale their business into new international markets. And as we've kind of highlighted before, it's very digital commerce focused. And it looks like by the end of 2026, it's projected to reach around almost 600 billion USD. So around about 500 billion GBP, I would say, by the end of this year. But yeah, as kind of going through all those facts, that is quite, as mentioned, quite prevalent and is something that should then happen moving forward. So as a non-UK seller, if you do decide to bring your sales, into the UK, start scaling, one thing you do need to be aware of is there is no thresholds for kind of sales or VAT for non-UK businesses that are trading inside the UK. Any kind of local thresholds are only applicable to UK registered businesses moving forward. So There are a few different triggers when it comes to requirement of a VAT registration, but the main one would be if you are dispatching goods from a UK fulfillment centre. That will be if you're doing own website, if you're doing marketplace, even kind of doing FBA, you would need to kind of move your goods into an Amazon warehouse within the UK. That would also trigger the need for you to obtain a UK VAT registration. Another area is in the UK, there's kind of a threshold for consignments that are imported through, and it's £135. Anything sold and with a consignment value below £135, you as the seller are required to collect and remit VAT on behalf of your UK consumer. So that would also trigger the need for a UK VAT registration, even if you are shipping those from a distribution centre, anywhere outside of the UK, whether where you're established or in another country and just filling into the UK moving forward. And then the other side of that would be if you do want to act as the importer of record for orders above that threshold, then also that would trigger the need for you to hold a UK VAT number moving forward. As mentioned, just with you importing into the UK, another thing you'll need to consider, it goes kind of hand in hand with the UK VAT. It's a UK EORI number, so it allows you to import into the UK and clear your goods at the border. With the EORI number and also obtaining that VAT number, you can use something called postponed VAT accounting to avoid paying import VAT at the border. And it kind of just postpones that onto your VAT return. So it really is great for kind of cash flow purposes, especially as you are beginning to scale your business in this new market. And when it kind of comes through, again, yeah, you need that EORI number to kind of clear those goods into the fulfillment centers, and also it can be used on any kind of high value goods or single value, single consignments that are coming into the UK as well. So obviously now we've looked at the UK market, another area that we're going to focus on is very quickly is just going to be kind of, looking at why you should expand into EU member states through 2026. There's a few different things here that we're going to run through. I'm just going to briefly kind of touch on these because we did have a webinar last month where we really focused on these hot new markets and ways you should consider. So if this is of interest, looking to explore growth, I would really recommend also watching our webinar last month, which will be on our YouTube channel, and also we can send you a link on demand as well. But just to kind of focus on the high key points of the EU, it is the largest economy in the world with over 450 million consumers. The revenue in the EU is always growing. It's expected to increase 7% to 819 billion in 2024. So obviously we're a couple of years on now, and I would expect that to exceed by another 100 billion or even more. And it's a secure and open investment framework. Everyone has access to the fair conditions, wider markets, and business growth around the EU. The EU free trade policies offer an environment of sustainable development. So it really is good for scaling those businesses, looking to explore into other member states. Very wide range of popular marketplaces. Obviously, as we've mentioned already a couple of times, it's got kind of Amazon. There's also Bol, which is a really hot up and coming kind of marketplace around the Netherlands and Belgium, I believe, as well as Allegro, which is in Poland and a few other Eastern European countries. So they are really growing, and also Zalando as well in Germany. How could we forget kind of that? And following on, obviously, with the point of Zalando, clothes and cosmetics are always a really popular kind of product. So if your goods are focused around those areas, it's really good for you to kind of look at growing into these markets because there could be quite a high demand for your products, and you could really see a success and boost in scaling the profits of your business. It also has more shoppers every year, and EU shoppers also often very much order cross border. There's also, the IELTS and the OSS schemes. I'm not going to touch too much on that just now because we are going to go through that very, very shortly. But looking at so if you do decide to kind of move forward with, scaling into the EU, how do you know where to tax when you are selling to the EU? So you need to look at a few different things. What is the precise nature of the taxable transaction? What's the status of your client? Are you selling business to business or business to consumer? And where are the goods delivered from/to? Are they going to be held outside or inside the EU at the point of sale? And who needs to account for the VAT? Is it kind of your customer, yourself, or the marketplace moving forward if you decide to sell through the marketplace avenue instead of own website? A few different things with the importing the goods into the EU if you decide to kind of import in and then sell onwards from there. Due to Brexit, obviously it's been quite a few years now since this kind of came into place, but just as a reminder, there is now a hard border between the UK and the European Union. So if you do decide to expand into both markets, if your goods are imported into the UK first, and then you want to say move your stock into a warehouse, say in the Netherlands, you would need to repay import VAT on entry into the Netherlands if it is applicable to your products, as well as any applicable duties. It also means that any kind of, as mentioned, commercial goods are subject to those importing procedures, whether they're kind of coming from the UK or outside the EU in general, they will just need to kind of go through the VAT, import VAT, and also the duties process. However, the good thing about importing into the EU is if you're importing into a member state inside the European Union, once those goods are cleared, they are then in free circulation and can be moved, stored, and sold in the EU as long as you have the correct and relevant registrations in place, which I'll go through just very, very quickly in a moment. But firstly, obviously, it's always the importer of record who is liable for customs clearance and the settling of the customs kind of debt up front. So this is something you would need to agree with your customers. Especially, I would say it's more common in the B2B market than it is in the direct consumer. So when it comes to, say, B2B wholesale and you're selling, let's just use a US business as an example. So goods are going from the US into Germany. You're doing a B2B transaction and say your customer and your business customer, sorry, acts as the importer of record. They would clear the goods through customs in Germany and cover that import VAT and duties. So there would be no requirement really for you to hold that VAT registration in Germany. However, on the flip side, if you were wanting to act as that importer of record because you may want to also warehouse in Germany or do other kind of activities within that your chosen market, you would trigger the need for that VAT moving forward also. And yeah, as mentioned, just going back to my point very briefly about where holding and storing stock and moving them around the EU, it's very similar to the UK. The main trigger for a VAT registration is going to be if you are holding stock inside a European country and making sales either locally or around the EU. Very similar to also Taeb's point a few slides back when, if you're making distance sales direct to consumer, you would also need something called a union one-stop shop registration, which we'll go through very, very shortly. So just following on from that, you do have a few schemes available with the one-stop shops. They are all simplified schemes. We're going to go into the Union One-Stop Shop and the Import One-Stop Shop mainly today, just because those are the ones that are focused on goods. However, just to very briefly kind of touch on the um, actual non-union one-stop shop, that is more so typically for you having digital sales. So if you have a joint, say, offering where you do a physical good, but also a digital product, for the physical good, you may obviously hold stock in the EU. That would be where your union one-stop shop would come into place. So that union one-stop shop is VAT validated against your local VAT number. So if you're holding stock in, say, the Netherlands, you'd get a Netherlands VAT number and a Netherlands one-stop shop number. And that will allow you to then sell freely for your physical goods around the European Union. With the non-union one-stop shop, if you're selling, say, a digital course or a digital book that goes alongside or as an additional add-on or a separate product to your physical, you may also need that non-union one-stop shop registration, and that allows you to sell digital goods around the EU. There are a few different, restrictions and limitations on the non-union one-stop shop. So if there's any questions or you're not sure if your product suits that, feel free to just reach out to us at Simply VAT and we can support you with any questions moving forward. The main one we're actually going to focus on is going to be the import one-stop shop because it's going to be a very key kind of practice, I guess, as you do begin to scale. So with the import one-stop shop, just know it is an optional scheme. I would say it's more so definitely recommended because it does have a better end user experience for your end consumer. With the IELTS, however, it does allow you to register in one singular member state and then basically collect and remit VAT on the goods going into your destination countries where your end consumer is located. So, in practicality, let's just say you're a UK business and you're looking to explore the European Union for the first time. You really are not sure kind of where your goods or if your goods might land in a popular market or anything like that, really. And you're not quite ready to make that investment into a local warehouse. Obtaining that import one stop shop will essentially allow you to hold your stock still inside the UK or wherever you're kind of located yourselves, well, then selling those across into the EU, and you collect and remit the VAT under one singular return. With that as well, it is a cap at 150 euros, however, so there is a limitation to that. You can only use the import one stop shop for products that go up to 150 euros. Anything above that, we would need to look at maybe a local registration or the alternatives that are available to you. But essentially, because it's on one return, you do get to see a bit more transparency about, the popular markets, where you owe the most VAT, and you can really then make a very well educated decision on, would I be looking to hold my stock in Netherlands or Germany? Because Germany is a more popular market, but say Netherlands is maybe better access to the port. So which one would be better? And then your sales might actually show you that, France is probably going to be the best option for you because that's where you've got the most sales happening and not looking at kind of those two main markets, if that makes sense. The other thing as well, just to kind of finalize these points before we move on to our Q&A session, that allows businesses, inclusive of also marketplaces, to collect and report the VAT due on the imported goods, as I've mentioned, just on that singular return. But that key point there is also marketplaces. So if you are already a marketplace seller, you may be able to utilize their import one-stop shop number for sales made on that platform to test those markets before making that investment to scaling your business further in those markets. The most important thing, however, is non EU traders need an IELTS intermediary in order to obtain that IELTS registration moving forward. And someone such as Simply VAT can act as that intermediary for you. So, if this is of interest, obviously, yeah, feel free to just ask any questions, as I've mentioned in those comment section. We're really keen to kind of look at how we can help scale your business moving forward. So now we're just going to jump into the Q&A. So we're going to bring Taya back and kind of look at some frequently asked questions regarding kind of the 13th directive and how we can look at moving that forward. But yeah, so the first question, Taya, that we've going to have for you is, I know it's a very broad question, as I know, obviously we've spoken about this quite a few times ourselves, but which types of expenses qualify for the VAT recovery under 13th directive? Obviously, I know you've mentioned there's some that can and
Yeah.
can't. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's any type of expenses, any type of expenditure really, can be service, can be goods, and of course subject to restrictions. As we mentioned before, each member state has its own local rules. What can be refunded, what cannot be refunded. So you have to be really, before you make the claim, you have to really know in that country what is allowed, what is not allowed. As we said, can be goods. If we purchase locally goods, if you have import VAT on paid, if you have hotel accommodation, catering, taxis, all those are eligible for a VAT refund.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, I think as we've discovered previously, it can be, yeah, some markets are a bit more kind of maybe strict than others. But following on from that, with the next question, what documentation is going to be required for submitting that 13th directive reclaim? Obviously, we've mentioned a few different things,
Yeah,
and it may differ, but is there
yeah.
any standardized things that we need to consider?
Apart from, of course, the application form, if it is done on paper or online, usually the most or all tax authorities, they will require what we call the VAT certificate or tax certificate. Just it is a certificate that proves that you are a taxable business established in that country. So you will need to request this from your local tax authorities, and you need to add this to your claim. And of course, if you are making this claim via the or with the help of an agent, of course you will need the power of attorney for the agent, so that they can act on your behalf. These are the main documentation that you need for 13 Directive VAT reclaim.
Perfect. And just following on from that as well, obviously, we know that it can take a bit to prepare that kind of application. When you do get ready to submit it, how long does it typically take to receive the kind of VAT refund?
Yeah.
And are there any markets that you would say actually take a bit longer than others, historically?
Yeah, correct. I mean, there are. I mean, usually from the date you submit the claim, you have really to count an average between 4 to 6 months. And of course, if the claim is queried or if the tax authorities are requesting more information, more documentation, then of course this time will increase. We have cases where probably took nearly 9 months or 12 months to get a refund. Some tax authorities are really strict. They scrutinize everything, which take them longer to refund. Some others, some other EU countries are not. But broadly, it takes between 4 to 6 months.
Perfect. And just as well with the kind of those bits, obviously there are a couple of questions that we have. I know we've kind of gone through this previously, but do businesses need a fiscal representative to handle the kind of VAT reclaim submissions in the EU? And also, I guess just following on from that, are there any markets that you found that for a VAT registration they actually need a fiscal representative,
Yeah.
but they may not need it for the actual 13th directive?
Yeah, good question, actually. Yeah, it's some tax authorities, some countries, EU member states, they require fiscal representative because you are based outside the EU, so they want a representative locally that it has a joint liability, just in case that there is an undue VAT paid VAT. So the fiscal rep will represent you. We will file the claim on your behalf, and as I said, they are going to be jointly liable. Just Liam mentioned that, yeah, some particular. We're talking about France, for example. France,
Mhm.
in France, for UK businesses, if a UK business wants to register for VAT in France, they don't require a fiscal rep. But if they want to claim the VAT under 13th directive, then they will need a fiscal rep. So now, no fiscal rep for VAT registration, but you need fiscal rep for VAT refund. So this is particular to France. Other countries, you either need fiscal rep for VAT registration or VAT refund, or either you don't need it.
That's super interesting. And I think that also leads us really on to the next like frequently asked question, because when it comes to the VAT registration itself, as we know, like non-EU businesses typically don't need to be VAT registered to submit a claim under the 13th directive. But when it kind of comes to that, when it when you do look at these things, are there any triggers that you then do need a VAT number slash don't need a VAT number? And like with a UK example, actually, how do you go about then appointing a fiscal representative if they need a 13th directive to reclaim input VAT, but they don't need one for the VAT registration, but they're VAT registered, if that makes sense? Because it's quite an interesting point.
Yeah, are we talking about the fiscal representation in the EU or in the UK?
In the EU, so
In the EU.
for the UK VAT registered business, let's say they don't have any supply VAT to kind of offset the input
Yeah,
VAT,
yeah,
so they then need to
yeah,
reclaim back that VAT, but they
yeah.
don't need a fiscal rep for the VAT registration kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah. Again, good question. Um, the main rule is to use 13 directive is you don't need to VAT register in that country, or you are not required to VAT register in that country. This is the main rule. So if you are VAT registered, of course, the input VAT reclaim will be done via the local VAT return. However, there are really small, tiny exceptions there. In some countries, for example, Germany, even though you are VAT registered there, you file VAT return. But if during the year you didn't have any sales to report, for example, you only had some VAT on purchases you want to reclaim. So the Germans are going to say, okay, because for this taxable year you didn't have any output VAT, you didn't have any VAT on sales, any taxable sales, then I'm afraid you cannot reclaim the VAT via the local VAT return. Instead, use the 13th directive, even though they have a VAT number in Germany, but they still cannot use the VAT return to get the input VAT back. Instead, they have to use the 13th directive. There is a similar one in France as well, but it's only in France. It's only when you make, say, on the sales side, you only make transfer of own goods. Okay, you are not making sale because it's a transfer of own goods to another member state, and for that, because this transfer is exempt, they say, okay, if this is what only you did for this year, you only moved your goods from France to the EU. Even though you have a VAT number, then 13th directive will be the way forward to reclaim the VAT, not through the VAT return.
Thank you. And we've got one final question just to really tie us off today. Again, we've gone kind of through this previously, but are there any deadlines and also minimum claim amounts businesses must be aware of? And
Yeah.
I have a spin off question to this. Are there any exceptions on the 13th directive or in any countries that allow you to go past the 1 year backwards as well?
Um, the Usually the deadline, as we said, is either 30th of June or 30th of September the following year. Okay. Um, this is and you can only recover. For example, now we are what you can recover now in 2026 only invoices dated 2025, and you have until the 30th of June 2026 or 30th of September 2026. Now there is one exception. I think it's in Netherlands. Netherlands, you can actually, if it's your first claim, you can actually go back up to 5 years to do that. So if in Netherlands you just notice that, oops, I did not, I have purchased VAT in Netherlands for the past 3, 4, 5 years. I did not reclaim it. Now I know I can reclaim it using 13th directive. Netherlands is the exception. You can go back up to 5 years, but the other countries, I'm afraid, it's only 1 year. So it's only invoices dated 2025. And I think we also say the minimum amount. Yeah, the minimum amount, as I said, if you make a claim, an annual claim, just 1 year, it's 50 euros, and if you're doing less than that, it is 450 euros.
Perfect. Thank you so much again, Taib. It's been a very interesting session. I've definitely also learned a few things from today. And just thank you again for obviously joining us. For anyone that didn't get a chance to ask any questions, this is going to be circulated as we've discussed. The other thing as well is we will have some resources available. We have a 13th Directive ebook. So it has been, as we've seen, quite content heavy today, a lot of different complexities surrounding the 13th directive. So I would recommend really reading this resource as it can really help kind of, tying together what you need to look at or if your suppliers are eligible. And again, if you think they are, please do reach out to us and we can kind of look at that for you. But yeah, this will be circulated very soon. Thank you all again for your time. And we'll be back next month with a new webinar. Again, thank you, Teb, and see you all soon.
Thank you. Thank you. Goodbye.